Got my little countdown on. How's everyone doing tonight? I am Dr. Tori J. Evans Barton. I'm the founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation. I am a trauma informed healing coach. I am the number one reunification expert in the country. And I'm doing a lot of different things right now. But I am grateful to be on tonight. We're trying these different times to see how it works. Somebody said, try 7 o'clock, Tori. So this week we try in 7 o'clock. I think 7 is the time. I think 7 o'clock is the time. 5:30 was way too early last week. I had to jump on. Hey, Charles, how are you? Charles, do you see the sweat? Look, it's cold. Is everybody staying warm all over this country? Atlanta, I know you cold. I'm cold in Florida. I'm on my way to Atlanta. I ain't going to Atlanta while y'all got ice and snow, though. So I need y'all to clear that up real quick before I get there. And Charles, you're in Miami. Are you in Miami? Are you cold in Miami? It was 40 something degrees this morning in South Florida. And I think it got up to maybe 58, 59 today. So it was a little chilly. Everybody was working through the coldness. Even my dog, he got his sweater on. Hey, Sarone, how are you? It's cold. I decided I'm complaining about 68 degrees. Yeah, you complain about 68 degrees. That's wrong. Yeah, you're wrong about that. So, yeah, we are live on a few platforms. I got Facebook, I got YouTube, and I got LinkedIn up tonight. We are going to do part 2 of the culture of fatherlessness. Last week we got into a pretty no, you're a wimp now. No, you playing games. It's not that. People are like, oh, you're from Michigan, you cold. Yeah, Atlanta gets 30 degrees. People couldn't believe that Atlanta could get to 30 degrees. I'm like, that's cold. I don't care what y'all say. I'm not necessarily cold in Florida, but I definitely felt the change. I knew it was colder. And I needed a sweatshirt. And this is what you guys need to know. In South Florida, you don't have heat. You got a blower. It's like a blow dryer. So houses, I live in a condo building. There's no heat. It's a blow dryer that can blow and warm up your house. So that's kind of part of the issue in South Florida. But tonight we're going to continue with the topic of the culture of fatherlessness. So last week we got on this conversation, got into this topic. And the reason I wanted to get into this topic is there are a couple of reasons. I have conversations with friends and family members, mainly friends at this point, where we're talking about, Charles said, not cold, chilly, where we're talking about cultures within families. And so often, we think of culture as, a race situation. Hi, Mom, how are you? We think about race situations. We think about, black, white, Italian, German. We think of that as culture, but families have culture. We may call it traditions. Some of the cultures we got into last week, we were talking about divorce, fatherlessness, cycles that we have, dysfunctional cycles. Tonight, I'm going to take it a little deeper. Last week, if you did not see the one from last week, go to YouTube or go to the Fatherless Generation Foundation Facebook page. You will see the conversation got deep and it got intense and it got there pretty quickly. As we talk about culture, I defined culture last week, and I got into the idea that culture, as customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements, a particular nation, a particular people, or social groups. But that's just one side of looking at culture. Culture is also biology. Culture is also like maintaining suitable ground, right? Conditions for suitable ground, suitable growth within that ground. When I think about culture, it caused me to think about cultivation. And this is where we went last week, where there are things within our families that are not good, that have been labored over, cultivated for the purpose. See, I like looking up words. So let me go back and do culture for you. I've read some of it, but I want to read all of it. Some of the definition: the act of tilling and preparing the earth for crops, cultivation, the application of labor or other means of improvement, right? That's not, improvement is not always the case. Culture is not always about improvement. It should be. But when we're talking about the culture of fatherlessness, I want you to get into your mind that ground has already been tilled, already been labored over, already been dug up to drive you in the direction that some of us say we don't want. It's driving you in the direction of the family culture, of the bloodline, of the things that may not be so favorable, but it's already there. It's already perfect for growth. It's already been plowed. And so in order to break cycles, you've got to step out of the family culture. That's a hard thing to do. When I think about family culture, one of the things I talked about last week was fatherlessness as a culture. When you look at families that have fatherlessness, a lot of these families, it's generation after generation after generation. I told you last week, I don't come from a line of fatherlessness. My mother grew up in a two-parent household. Yes, the family had its own dynamics and dysfunctions, as all families do. But my generation is the first generation of fatherlessness within my mother's and my father's family. So that's an interesting dynamic to even think about, how that is created, how that happens. It happens from trauma. It happens from dysfunction. And not just in my family, that's how it happens in all families. I'm not special. Okay. My mother, my family, we're not special in that way. This is how the enemy gets in. As I dug into that conversation last week, we got into some heavy artillery. We got into some stuff that I think you would really enjoy going back and listening to. I want to go someplace right now that I read. I'm doing a study on faith and walking by faith. And as I'm reading about walking by faith and radical faith, right? Reading about Abraham, he had radical faith. He had a faith to believe God for multiple things. When they're discussing Abram, because he was Abram at the time, they're discussing him. And Abram was called to leave his family, his kinsmen, right? That's the word kinsman, his family. He was called to leave in the land that he knew. And here are the things that, when you're called to leave those things, here are the things that you're required to leave. You're required to leave behind everything. That means your inheritance, the protection afforded by family gods. That was one. Means of providing and provision and security. So those are the four things when you walk away to follow by faith. You're walking away from four things: your inheritance, the protection afforded by family gods, the means of provision, and security. When I read the protection afforded by family gods, something jumped out at me and I said, this is perfect for the conversation on Tuesday night. It's absolutely perfect. Biblically, we see family gods as statues, as idols. But have you ever considered that divorce is a family god? Have you ever considered addiction is a family god? That's part of the culture of your family. Have you ever considered that mental health issues and crises are a part of your family gods? Have you ever thought of it in that way? And so when you step out of your kinsmen and you follow after God, you end up breaking curses and cycles, and you step out of what they call the bloodline, the family line. That's that plow that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ground that has already been tilled for growth, conditions for growth. What are you growing? The very thing that's been in your family for generations. That's why we talk about generational curses. And so often we keep saying, I don't want to be that way. I promised myself as a kid I wouldn't do that. I promised I wouldn't be like this. I promised. You can promise that all day long, but without the tools, you're going to repeat the same cycles. Without the tools, you don't have the ability not to. So I want you to think about, you can type it in the chat if you'd like to, but what are your family gods? If I'm going to put it in the context of family gods are divorce, family gods are addiction, family gods are teenage pregnancy, poverty is a family god. High school dropout, that's a family god. When you think about the statistics around fatherlessness, what is your family god? What is the thing that if you look back, you see a pattern of it? When you look back, you see the same thing happening over and over and over in each child, in each generation, except those who stepped away and broke the curse. What is that? What is that? I think I see when I think about some of the friends around me who are having, or clients are who are having these moments. Abuse is a family god. Your mother abused you, but when you look back, her father abused her, or her, and the grandfather abused the father. You know what I mean? Like, think about that. I need for you to recognize that we're always going to trace your trauma, as my one friend calls it. I call it connecting the dots to your pain, connecting the dots. Because if you connect the dots, it'll make you aware of what it is that the work you need to do in order to step out from underneath these things that are impacting you. We do not recognize it because we go from childhood into adulthood, and sometimes we're thrown into adulthood. We don't have time to go back and reflect on childhood until it starts knocking at your door, hunting you down, breaking up relationships, creating havoc in your finances, creating havoc in your career, your ambitions, your push, your drive to be something outside of your family norm. That's when you begin to go, what is going on? Sometimes you don't even look at the family moment and the family issues, or I should say the family gods, that culture within your family. You don't think that, because when you think those things, you have to implicate those who you love. And it's never about blaming people. It's just about being aware as to how this got into your life. I don't blame my mother. I don't blame my father for the situation I ended up in. That's just not a thing for me. There are other issues, but this is my fatherless journey. You know how many fatherless children there are? I'm grateful for the journey because it's taught me a lot of things about myself, and um, it's given me this platform. Can we have that conversation? It's given me this platform where I can now look and say, because of how I was raised, and because what the enemy meant for my harm, which keeps coming up in scripture, like they were singing the song at church, and when I was doing the announcements, I was like, this is the thing. What the enemy means for your harm, God turns it around for your good, right? But that's not the whole scripture, as I said Sunday. The whole scripture is for the saving of many souls. The enemy meant my fatherlessness to be my harm, but God turned it around for my good so that I could reunite with my father, learn the other part of who I am, and then utilize it to save many souls other than myself. I have the blueprint to reunification. I am very clear of that. And guess where it came from? It came from on the inside of me, it came from within me, because I walked it out. Some of you are just so afraid to walk out of your family cultures and your family culture of fatherlessness, and you're wondering the how. How do I do it? How you have to get before God. You have to start reading. You have to start going to therapy and counseling. You have to get with coaches to teach you the tools on how to do that. I'm going to give you some pointers tonight on how to break free from family culture and how to break free from the culture of fatherlessness. But that took a lot of work on my end too. I didn't just automatically get the blueprint of fatherlessness. I walked through some very dark and lonely roads to get there. And I still some days feel like I'm walking through dark and lonely roads. But at the end of the day, I need you to understand that stepping out from underneath the shadows of family secrets, um, family gods, cultures, and traditions, addiction is a family god. Some of you have addictions and you go, well, at least I don't have addiction to this, because I know in my great grandmother, she was addicted to heroin, or she was addicted to crack. But you're addicted to food and you think that it's less. Well, that's not the same. It is the same. It's the same spirit. It's the same thing holding you hostage. It's the same thing keeping you in the same cycle of fatherlessness, and you just don't understand it and you don't see it. So hopefully tonight that will reveal something to somebody, that because it's not at the same level as so and so and so and so in your family, you think that it's not the same thing when it is. It's the exact same thing. A spirit of addiction doesn't matter. It doesn't care what you're addicted to. A spirit of fatherlessness doesn't care how you become fatherless. People are like, oh, well, my parents were married. That's a thing, right? That's a better thing. It's better to be fatherless after marriage and divorce than to be birthed into fatherlessness, or birthed into fatherlessness from an adulterous affair. There are spiritual implications that exist in those two things that don't exist when your parents were married and in a loving relationship spiritually. Doesn't mean you won't have the mental issues. Doesn't mean that you won't have the developmental issues. It doesn't mean that you won't have the psychological issues. It doesn't mean that. However, spiritually, you are ahead of the game. You are ahead of the ball. I won't get into the two, why those two are an issue. I did it before earlier last year. Maybe I'll circle back on that next week, but that's something we really have to take into account. But the spirits don't care what you're addicted to. It doesn't care how you get into drugs or how you get if it's food. It doesn't care if you're a high school dropout in the 6th grade or the 12th grade. It does not care. The mission is to get you to follow the family culture and the family pattern that leads you into places of fatherlessness. Y'all hear Tokyo over there? Come here. You gonna come here? He's whining. He wants to play with his what is it? His lamb chop. A neighbor bought him a gift. He wants to play with his lamb chop. So let's go into this. When Abram walked out of the family line, when he decided to step away, when he decided that he was going to walk out the purpose that God had planted on the inside of him by faith, getting an initial command, not knowing what direction he was going to go, what he was doing was divorcing all of the gods that had been in his life, all of the family traditions that had been the ancestral past that had been a part of his life. But here's the other part that I want you to think about. When you follow after God and you follow the things of God, you separate from patterns, habits, and you find yourself learning new ones. Now, it requires you to learn new ones. I know some people are like, okay, well, when you separate from these things, does it all just disappear? No, you'll be drawn back into that if you don't replace old habits with new ones, or past worship with new worship. We don't want you to get back into the ancestral past, meaning the bloodline, the patterns of your grandparents, the cultures of the family gods. I don't want you to do that. I want you to find new habits. And I think they say it takes 21 days to learn a new habit, 21 days for it to stick or something like that. I think it's 63 days total. So it's 21, 21, 21. You have to follow these things in order to lock in a new habit. Patterns are going to be on cyclical, on cycles. So let me, I'm personal. I'm personal. So I recognize that even in my marriage, there were cycles. There were cycles, and there was a cycle that would happen in July, the end of June, July. That cycle would go on for about a month and a half or whatever, and we would have this few months of bliss, right? And then right after Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, a new cycle would start. January 1st, that cycle would go off about the 1st or the 2nd. And then the next cycle would start the end of March, beginning of April. And so these cycles didn't come from me. These cycles came from my husband. Now, I've learned a few things through the journey, and some of these are family cycles. Some of these didn't even come from him. Like, these are just things that are spiritually connected to him that sometimes I don't think he's aware of. I don't have cycles in that sense. I had financial cycles. So my business has, it makes money during certain seasons, and other seasons it doesn't. That becomes cyclical and can actually reveal family gods even in my life. Financial is the thing. That is the moment. That is the piece for me. So I'm not throwing out his cycles and not my own. My cycle of lowness starts around August. It'll pick back up, or that'll stop. I'm sorry, that'll stop in August. August is about middle of September. It'll pick back up October to the middle of November, and then it's dead up until around this moment. So I have 3 cycles or 2 cycles as well. Those cycles constantly would go on. I'm working on breaking those cycles. And even last year, I was really intentional about ensuring that I was breaking those cycles, not just last year. I think I started that in 2020, where I had to make sure that during the harvest seasons, I'll say, during the prosperous months, I was putting more aside so that I wouldn't have, although it might have been slow at work, we didn't feel it in my household. Although it might have been slow at work, I didn't want my household to feel that. Sometimes, let me give you number one, you have to prepare so the cycle doesn't impact your journey. That's number one. You have to prepare. There's a preparation. Some of you don't know how to prepare for the cycle because you don't recognize the cycle. So let me go back. Number one, you have to recognize the cycle. You have to know when it hits. Number two, you've got to prepare for the cycle. How you break the cycle is you've got to get in preparation mode. Once you're aware of it, number one. Number two, you've got to prepare for it. It's about to come. What do I need to do differently? And as you're aware of it over the years, you can prepare differently. What people don't recognize, and I know biblical, I'm going biblical and I go biblical on Tuesday nights. A faith walk is trial and error. I know it makes it look like these people knew what they were doing. These people didn't know what they were doing any more than you know what you're doing. Abram got a command. Go. God never told him where he was going. He just started to go. And we act like he went from home to the promised land within a few weeks. He didn't. His father ended up dying in the wilderness, and it was like 100 years after they left. It was like a long time. Stop believing the hype that once you get this moment and this command from God, or you get this moment in your relationship, that you're supposed to know the next step. No. You may know the next step, but until you do that step, you don't get the next one. And that can be a very tiresome, slow road. Now, we're not talking about 100 years. However, we may be talking about a few years. It may take you 6 months to a year to recognize the pattern and the cycles, because you've got to study it for at least a year. So now that I've made you aware of it, it's going to take you at least a year to recognize it. Or at least you'll go, okay, there's this moment. But now once you recognize it, you'll be immersed in it and you'll go, whoa. So that's the 6 to 12 months right there. And then once you start to prepare and you're doing trial and error, what works, what doesn't work, that could be another 2 or 3 years. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed by what I'm saying. This is going to take time. This is not an overnight fix. Breaking free from the culture of fatherlessness and family cultures and family gods isn't an overnight thing. It takes a lot of time. And so when we get into the conversations of fatherlessness, too many people think they're supposed to find their father, reunite with their father, and it's all a happy ending. That's not real. I had real moments with my father where I had to let him know that wasn't cool for you to say, sir. Okay, now you got one more time. You got one more again to say something like that. It didn't happen often, but it did happen. And I was uncomfortable. I think I told you guys this before. I was uncomfortable. There were times when I was just super uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable because it was unfamiliar. When you are breaking the culture of fatherlessness in your life, you have to get used to being uncomfortable. I'm going to say that's 2A. In preparation, you've got to prepare to be uncomfortable. As you prepare to be uncomfortable, a lot of people will run from that space. A lot of people will run from that moment because we don't like to be uncomfortable. But healing is uncomfortable. You got to be prepared for the pain that you're going to experience. My mother raised me one way, and my father looked totally contrary to that way. And I'm like, I'm bougie. I'm special. I'm bougie. I require, yeah. My father, he's country. He was country. Nothing wrong with that. But I was learning some things. I had to learn some things, learn my roots. Now, that was uncomfortable. Not because he was country, just his delivery sometimes. And I'm like, whoa, I had to learn that. Part of that was him being country, but here's the other part. The other part was him being a man, and I wasn't used to that manly advice and that manly tone, that manly. My mother can tell you, if she's still on here, men would talk to me and I would just cry. They weren't saying anything negative. They were just having a real talk, that real moment where men are trying to impart into you. And I'm like, yeah. Charles, get off my. I don't know if you know me like that, but okay. He said, I think I told you before you were bougie. I am. I don't think anything's wrong with that. I don't hold any. I can be bougie on a budget. I can be bougie. It just depends on the situation. However, I'm humble too. Let's go there. But as I'm talking about the patterns, the things that you have to break, you have to become aware and you have to be clear on the patterns. And once again, this takes time to break the culture of fatherlessness in your life. You've got to be okay with being uncomfortable. Whew. Got to be okay with my skin used to be on fire sitting in the same room with my father. I mean it. And he wasn't saying anything bad. Sometimes he wasn't even talking. We were just sitting there watching TV. My skin would be like, I gotta go. I don't want to stay here. Oh man. But I knew I needed to stay. But my skin was like, girl, get out of here. I know some people are like, well, maybe that was a sign. No, it wasn't. No. Being uncomfortable is not a sign that you need to exit. You never knew how to handle what, Mom? My mother is on here tonight, y'all. She said, I never knew how to handle that. I don't even know what you're talking. Handle what? Me crying with the men or my dad? Because I know you didn't know how to handle that. So that was, my skin was on fire, but I pressed through being uncomfortable. And I can tell you, when you get to the other side of it, it is beautiful. Hey, Darren, I can tell you it was beautiful. I get to live out a life that many people never break through to. I know they don't. Because when I'm talking to people about reunification, breaking curses, stepping out of your bloodline and getting to know your father and realizing that maybe your mama lied to you. Your mama lied. Okay, so like a lot of people struggle with that. And they decide that costs too much. Now, I will tell you, I'm going to give you number 3, because I said number 1 is becoming aware of these patterns. Number 2 is preparation. Number 2A is being okay with being uncomfortable. Number 3, you got to count the cost. Having real conversations with real men. My mother, she didn't know how to handle that. That's true. I mean, I would just bust out into tears. Like nobody was expecting it. They weren't cussing me out. They weren't saying anything vulgar. They weren't saying anything bad to me. And in that moment, interesting. And in that moment, okay, Callie, I don't know why you said that, but okay. In that moment, I would just bust out into tears. But it was because I wasn't used to the voice of a man. I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to the voice of a father speaking to me. So it was uncomfortable. And as a young girl, and I'm talking about teenager, I'm talking about like 17, 18, even probably 19, 20. I would cry. When I think about it, I still do the same thing with my husband. Like I've done that with him, made him think that he was walking on eggshells or it was on whatever it was. No, it's part of how I respond to a man having a hard talk with me. I'm just processing it. It's part of how I process that hard talk. Doesn't mean anything bad. It's just how I respond. Right? But you got to count the cost. Count the cost for what that is. Count the cost for how that's going to look on the other side. You're going to lose some family members. You're going to lose some people along the journey. And they're going to be close to you. And it's going to be intimate family members. You have to walk away because of what I'm going to read something to you tonight. that I want to dig into a little bit, because this goes into um, the culture of fatherlessness and breaking free from it. We call it breaking the curse, right? Breaking the curse is not as easy as that sounds. That just sounds like real, like, oh, I break the curse. No, 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 no. First, you need to identify the curse. Where does the curse come from? Who does it come through? You can say all of those things like I break the curse and maybe name it, but then it starts to unravel as God reveals it to you. Comes through this family member, comes through this line, it comes through, and that becomes very uncomfortable, because I'm gonna read this to you. This is a young lady I've become friends with over the last 7, 8 months, easy. I guess I followed her for years. We've met a few times in Atlanta, but as I've been going through my journey, she we connected, and she saw something, and she said God told her to call me. So we have been connected since June of this year, of last year. I'm sorry, but she posted this, and I was on a call that she talked earlier. She's on right now, actually, and I have a friend listening in. She gonna give me the notes. Um, but she said, next generation, did you know you have toxic relatives sitting back trying to figure out who your spouse and children are, so that they can try to infiltrate, pick them for information, and interfere? See, you've got to recognize that part of family culture and family gods is unsuccessful relationships. And there are people who are single, not by choice, single because they kept repeating the patterns and the cycles of the family, and they want you to be in the same position. So that's what they do. It says they really believe your family is their right. Ooh, cha. This is what you call a controlling, entitled, I'm going to add manipulative spirit. They don't understand boundaries, operate in enmeshment and emotional incest. Y'all got to go to my other, I posted that on TFGF's page. Go to the page and look up the videos about emotional incest. When mothers deem their sons the man of the house, they make their daughter the parent of the children. And it happens so often in single parent homes. It's not, I don't believe it's intentional. I don't believe it's intentional. Oh, I think you're talking about the pageant, Mom. I'm glad you said that when we went to Mr. Jones to ask for money for you. I think that was for the pageant. I had to raise money. You cried, and I didn't know why. That's interesting. I used to cry all the time, too. Hey, it's part of I come from, you don't I? I think that was for the pageant I was in. And so you had to raise money. I used to be a pageant girl, y'all. I used to do that stuff. Modeled, would kill a fashion show. Mom, you better tell them. Your daughter had a walk. My mother sent me to Barbizon. I had the walk of all walks. I might not have been the cutest girl because it took a minute for this to come together. But but I had the walk in the fashion shows. Still might be able to emulate that walk. But go onto the page and look up emotional incest, because mothers don't realize that they are leaning on their children emotionally and to be the emotional love supply in the household, because there's no father there. You literally become the role of the father or the mother, depending on the situation, as a child growing up in a single parent home. Ask yourself why would anybody want to do this to a child, recognizing that this is disrespectful to your boundaries, because there are spirits in operation within these family members, generational, and they are desperate to pass them on. That line right there put me out. That's how generational curses work. Too many of us are not aware of our generational curses. But let me tell you, if you're on the Fatherless Generation Foundation, you've got to know that fatherlessness is the curse people trying to pass on to you. Oh, I don't want my daughter to be a teenage mama, but you're not doing anything to keep her from out there running the streets, or you're not even prepping her or telling her the journey that you went on. See, many parents can help break the curse by telling the children the sins that are going to visit them. But you're so ashamed of your past that you won't tell your children because you're hiding. You won't tell your children because you don't want them to think of you as a hoe or something else you've been out there doing, whatever that is. And men, sowing your wild oats, that doesn't benefit you. You know why that doesn't benefit you? Because you end up sleeping with someone who you barely know, and then you have a child with her, and then you want to make up for all of that when you get married to someone who is the perfect fit, the perfect person. But you've sown all your wild oats in these women, wild oats, with God knows what kind of women. Anything that offers you an opportunity, you laying with it, bringing all of those things into your relationship, into your marriage. That is the culture of fatherlessness waiting to happen to you, waiting to knock on your door, waiting. But fathers, either you're not around due to you've been forced out, you chose to be out, or you're in the house and you're emotionless. I think that's a word. Emotionless, yes. And so you refuse to talk to your children about that because that means stay in a child's place, stay out of grown folks' business. There's a time and place to express this. There's a time and place where you can tell your children the journey you went on. So, no, you didn't. Mom, stop it. Stop. I cannot. There's a time and a place for that. It's age appropriate too. When you see your daughter or your son going down a direction that you've gone down, you need to sit them aside and share your story honestly, not just from a place of don't do that because I said so. Many of you probably even want to forget the fact that you did some of these things. You want to forget the fact that you walk some of these pathways. But I need you to recognize that, hey, generational curses, this is how they operate. They're desperate to pass on the next thing or to the next person. There are people who had and have the opportunity to be delivered, but don't. And the spirits in them become adamant that your child, your family will participate in the generational dysfunction or be harassed by toxic relatives. And they can be domineering. Let me go here. Some of you have toxic relatives and you know it. Toxic mamas, toxic fathers, toxic aunties, toxic grandmothers, toxic sisters and brothers, and you know it, but because blood is thicker than water, as we say, which it's not, especially not in a marriage situation, you choose to follow that path. You choose them every time. There's a reason God told men to leave and cleave. He didn't say that to the woman. I just need you to understand that. Men were never told, or women were never told to leave and cleave. Men were. Leave and cleave. Probably because it's hard for you. And especially if you grew up in a single parent household and you have some confusion about your role and you have confusion about your mother's role in your life, you have a hard time leaving and cleaving because you're like, well, that's my mama. I posted a video last week. Jim Jones, who's a rapper, I used to watch Love and Hip Hop. New York was one of my favorites. And it was when Chrissy and Jim were on there. Those who have watched it, you know who I'm talking about. Those who have not, just follow the story. Jim had a lot of trouble committing to this woman that he's with. He's still with her. They've been together probably 20 years at this point. They've not been married. They do not have children. Jim Jones, his mother has always interfered. And I'm talking about at a level where I've thrown things at a TV before, like, really? Interfering on such and such a level. And he came out on Angela Yee's podcast a couple weeks ago. Angela Yee does The Breakfast Club with Charlemagne the God. He comes out and he talks about how his mother taught him how to French kiss. Okay. People are like, okay, well, how did she teach you? He said, with her mouth. Okay. So she kissed you. Yes. Huh. That's emotional incest. He keeps talking. Angela says, my family, we barely kiss in the mouth now, like we peck. And he's talking about as a 17-year-old. He was like, and not only did his mother teach him how to kiss, his mother taught him how to French kiss, y'all. French kiss. So as he's talking about this, it becomes like, people are like, what? And he's going on and on about how his mother taught him. And he said, it's my mother. He said, when I first kissed a girl, it was uncomfortable and it was weird. But my mother? No, he's from New York. Mother. And I was like, this is the reason he can't marry this other young lady, because his mother is already his wife. See, you guys don't realize how the enmeshment works and how the culture of fatherlessness is a spirit that is constantly moving through. It is infiltrated court systems. Some of you don't even realize that it's the court system that you're dealing with. You think, oh, it's all about the Constitution. No, that's a spiritual journey too. Some of you need to pray. Okay. You want to see your children and be reunited with them? Some of y'all need to get down on your knees and pray. You're so caught up in its corrupt courts, it's bad attorneys, it's greedy attorneys, it's Title 4D. Yes. But how did those things get planted in there? What spirit put that in there? Because I'm going there tonight. There's a culture, and the culture is spiritual. The culture has infiltrated families through spiritual means, by way of spiritual means. And some of you are like, well, we go to church. Child, religion is the worst way. Relationship is how God intended it to be. But religion opens you up to so many different spirits, negative energies, demons, generational curses, things of that nature. It opens you up to it. And many of you have grown up and were like, I'm stepping away from this. I don't want anything to do with religion. No, you don't. You ever wonder how the sanctified girl who had that heavy blue jean skirt all the way down to her knees ended up getting pregnant at 15, 16? Y'all ever wonder that? I did. They were so sanctified, Darren, and they couldn't do anything. Darren, I'm just seeing what you're saying. Was that Hamlet or Macbeth? I don't even know where I was in that conversation. I don't even remember. Maybe you can remind me. But you guys ever wonder that? You wonder how the very quiet little white girl in the corner who's a brilliant in science, how she ended up, but you look back in her family and she had a single mom and it was an ugly divorce and they were alienated from their father but didn't know it. This is how these patterns happen. How do you break them? I'm going to keep repeating. 1, being aware, connecting the dots. 2, patterns. Looking at the cycles. Oh, I think that was Macbeth. I don't remember that in Hamlet. I don't know as much about Macbeth as I do Hamlet. I don't remember that being in Hamlet. Maybe somebody else knows. So number 1, being aware. Number 2, recognizing the patterns. 2A, as I call it, being uncomfortable in recognizing the patterns. Number 3, counting the cost. It's going to cost you. It's going to cost you. And the cost is family. As I read to you earlier, not only is the cost family, the cost is the inheritance. The cost is the protection. What'd I do with it? Oh, here it is. I keep note cards. It's the inheritance. It's the protection afforded by the family gods. It's means of provision and it's security. Some of us in our family line, financial provision comes through our family, right? When we need help. When you walk away from this, you're not going to necessarily be able to call to get help, even if you need it. The security that comes from having a family, you're not going to have that. You're going to have to create that yourself. You have to create people around you, create situations around you that bring security and provision and protection for you. That means you're starting your own traditions. You're starting your own journey. When you break the culture of fatherlessness, and certain people can't come because they want to stay in that toxicity, they want to stay in that family line, and they want to be the people who create havoc in your life, harass you spiritually, put you in situations where they're desperate to pass on these things into your life, and you break free from them. Trust me, you got to count the cost, because it's going to be hard, because they do provide something to you. I know it sounds super negative. It's like, well, why would I want them to be in my life anyway? No. They provide something for you. They do. They provide an inheritance. They provide provision and security. And those things are hard to let go of. Hard to let go of. That's not easy. Walking through life alone for a season until you build that structure around you as you're breaking this off, that ain't easy. Trust me, I know. I'm in that season right now. It's not easy. It can get dark real quick. But I recognize the beauty of getting to the other side of it because I've walked some things before. I've walked out some things. I've counted the cost before. And as I realize the things that I have to leave, I also realize the stuff that I'm headed to. I realize what's coming next. Something great is on the horizon because I've chosen to walk this journey. Some great things are happening even now, but something even greater is on the horizon. Many of you don't want to, you count the costs and see all of the subtractions, and you can't envision the additions that will come the moment you're obedient. It's got to be hard when I look back through scripture to be Abram, and I recognize that he had a feeling about leaving his kinsmen, his family, and his country. God told him to leave everything behind. He didn't. He took two people with him, his father and Lot. He's supposed to take his wife. He took his servants. But he took family with him that God didn't tell him to take. Even Abram had feelings about leaving his family behind. But here's the rub. His father died halfway to the destination. See, you can walk so far with them, but they're going to fall off at some point. Death is not what we want it to be. We don't want that to be the reason or the situation that causes them to fall off. His father was elderly. Lot got him into a whole lot of trouble. I would consider Lot to be a toxic family member. Got him into a whole lot of trouble. And I'm using the biblical account because that's what illuminated this conversation for me. Lot got him into a whole lot of trouble. Named Lot, he got him into a lot of trouble. And in getting Abram into a lot of trouble, they eventually had to part ways. And guess what happens after that? He's then able to start walking into what was promised to him. But until then, he was getting sprinkles of it. He was getting little crumbs of it. But once him and Lot separated, they went their way. You pick your side, I pick my. We go our separate ways. Abram finds himself blessed. See, some of y'all say, I'm blessed. I'm too blessed to be stressed. But you stressed. And you're repeating patterns and cycles that you promised yourself you wouldn't. As I gave you some tools tonight, and I'm going to give you one more before I get off of here, I want you to realize that as I'm reading about toxic family members, don't get it twisted. Not all family members are going to be toxic. Not all family members do you have to leave behind. We're specifically talking about the family members who are hindering, harassing, and are determined to pass on all of those negative cycles that are in your life, that are in the family, in the generational line. Some of you have success in your family line. As I talked about last week, before life hits people, and talking to one of my aunties a lot lately, learning a lot about my grandmother. She had her issues, but she had some amazing qualities about her before those life issues happened to her. I only knew her as a firecracker. No, she loved, as I said last week, I know I was one of her favorites. And I know that she loved me. But I recognize how she dealt with my mother, she dealt with my mother's sisters, how she dealt with people in her life. But that was after life hit her. Learning about her as a young child, learning about her as a young adult, I have some positive things that I feel about her. I think she was fire and dope. But I also realized life hit her, and she then created trauma and dysfunction and toxicity within my family line. Now, maybe that comes from her mother, right? Start implicating grandparents, great grandparents, right? But we have to recognize not only the bad, I'm saying, this is what I'm saying. We have to recognize not only the bad in the family line, but the good. What can you grab and cultivate yourself that helps you break the curse, but then also keep some of the amazing family traditions that do exist? What can you do to do that? Not everything in your family line is bad or toxic or dysfunctional. So I want to make sure I'm not only leaning to one side of this in a negative conversation, but having the positive side of it too. As grandparents and parents say, you take the good with the bad. And that means that life is going to happen to you, and good things are going to happen and bad things are going to happen. And hopefully eventually it all washes out. You take it all. Because good eventually can come out of the bad. But I look at all sides. My mother was like, "Oh, I used to cry all the time." And I'm like, "I come from you. We're very sensitive people." But I'll say it on here. That means that my mother is just as spiritual as I am. And she has a sensitivity to spiritual things, but because that hasn't been cultivated, mine got cultivated. But aren't we supposed to be better than our teachers? We're supposed to be better than our parents. And so there's ways that mine was cultivated and I became better than my mother, and my children will become better than me. Yeah, my children, I'm calling them into existence. They become better than me. So that's no slight to my mother. That's just where we are in life. You want your children to be better than you. You want your children to have more than you. My children are going to have similar conversations with me. We act like our parents are the only ones who are doing difficult and toxic things. My children will at some point have a conversation with me about some dysfunction, some toxicity, something that I've done to them. That's just what life is. But don't get it twisted. I am doing everything in my power to overcome the culture of fatherlessness, the culture of addiction, the culture of mental health, the culture of poverty. I'm doing everything I can to overcome these curses that come through my family line so my children don't have to. Prayerfully, they're battling less than I did. That's the prayer. So as time winding down, number one, becoming aware of family cycles and cycles within your life and in your journey. It's going to take some time, as I said. Number two, thank you, Miss Callie. Number one, I want you to become aware. Number two, pay attention to the patterns. So as you become aware of the patterns, I need you to pay attention to months and seasons. I'm sorry. Yeah. And patterns, preparation of those patterns, right? You're preparing. As you become aware, you need to prepare and pay attention to when they hit, what they look like. Because when we're breaking curses and family traditions and family gods, as I started calling them early on, they show up in seasons. And they have a normal season, a normal cycle. Pay attention to the cycle and prepare as you learn the cycles, prepare for those cycles. Number two, be cool with being uncomfortable. That's 2A, and being uncomfortable in that preparation season as you're investigating, as you're looking. Because when things are revealed, that's when things are uncomfortable. And number three, I need you to count the cost. It's going to cost you some stuff. It's going to cost you some family members. And as I said, I'm going to repeat it. It's going to cost you your inheritance. It's going to cost you the protection that has been afforded to you by those family gods. There's comfortability and ability in knowing, oh, I can get a divorce because my mama, my grandmother, my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, my brothers all got divorced. There's comfortability in that. There's protection in that. Because I can always fall back on what my family does. That's protection. Because as soon as you go the route that they want you to go, they've got you. They protect you. And you think it's sound and it's good and it's loving. And later on, you learn it was deceitful and it was trickery to get you to follow the same path they've been on. Number three, the thing that you give up is the provision, the means of provision, and then the security. And I said to you earlier, when you're counting the cost, I need you to know that when you're counting the cost, it's lonely for a moment. You've got to build you've got to build that team and that group around you that's going to walk you through not only just this moment, but they're going to be your new family, because blood ain't thicker than water. It ain't. Mm-mm. I have covenant friendships. Covenant is a breaking of blood. You remember y'all used to do, I didn't do it because I don't cut myself. People cut themselves and make themselves blood brothers, blood sisters. Some of us are covenant sisters and friends and all of that. And marriage is a covenant in itself. That's why it says leave and cleave. But many of you can't leave and cleave because you don't recognize the patterns. And part of it is you won't count the cost. So when your mother is there, your daughter is there, and your wife is there, see those memes online, you don't know who to pick first. It's your wife, fool. Your wife. That's the one you have covenant with. You don't have covenant with your mother. You don't have covenant with your daughter. You don't. You don't have covenant with your sons. Stop treating your sons like they're your husbands. They're not. They're not. You just son, he married, he come over and do this and do that. You need to call Angie's List. You need to find a maintenance dude, a handyman, something. Your son is busy. He got other things he got to do. His wife already gave him a honey-do list. You are not on the honey-do list. Now, if he chooses to come over and his wife is cool with that, yep, I said it. His wife is cool with that because that's part of submitting one to another. Then that's okay. But you don't as a mother-in-law, as a bonus, as a mother in love, you don't force what you need your son to do or your daughters to do over what they're supposed to be doing with their covenant partner. That gets into what we're calling enmeshment and emotional incest. I'm gonna give you those 3 tonight. I'm gonna give you 3 more next week. I don't want to go too deep and too far because I move fast, and people always tell me, Tori, that was a lot deeper, and you gave me too many to deal with. So I'm only give you 3 tonight, and I'll give you the other 3 next week. But I want you to recognize that we're dealing with some very heavy artillery, and it's not, and I mean artillery, because these are weapons used against you. That's why I'm having this conversation. These are weapons used against you to keep you broke down, busted, and disgusted. You can't even see your kids, and you're like, why can't I see my kids? You're a grown man. You got custody orders. You don't have a custody order. Kanye West is online right now. You know how many people have DM'd me? I emailed Kanye. I emailed Teddy Riley. I know one of Kanye's best friends, so I hit them up. I hit up Rhymefest. I just did an event with him 2 years ago. I was like, if he needs help, really, I can help him. I don't know if he really needs help. I don't know if he's going to receive my help. Maybe we should pray that he does. Good night, Mom. So I just need you to understand that, yeah, this is all a pattern. And you can't figure out why you can't see your kids because your father couldn't see you. And his father couldn't see him. But nobody ever told you that. You heard other stories. Come from underneath the lies. That's going into number 4. Let me get out of here. Just so you guys know, the Fatherless Generation Foundation is reopening offices. St. Louis is coming. Atlanta is already open. Miami, Fort Lauderdale will open in the next couple of weeks. My podcast, I am headed to Atlanta to shoot my podcast. I've got some amazing conversations coming. I'm looking up because all my people who I'm interviewing are up on my board right here. Amazing people that I'm interviewing. I am about to take a trip, a very long international trip, and I'm super excited about it. The Fatherless Generation Foundation is now incorporated in South Africa and now in Lusaka, Zambia. So we're now going to do work over there. There's a lot of people who are getting on the expansion that's happening. And I'm super grateful. This is the season where I'm intentional about my friendships. I'm intentional about the next season that I'm in, simply because this work has to be elevated. We don't have time to be dealing with 5, 10s, and 20s anymore. We are now going to start a $2 million campaign for 2022. We are looking for the money to elevate this mission. We can do more when we have money. So that's a plug for anyone who would like to donate. I'm gonna put it out here. TFGF.org. Hold on. It's loading. You can even do Cash App. I'm putting it out here. I typically don't, but that's part of my issue. Team Reunite. And those are you can do PayPal, but I don't know that off the top of my head. I don't know that off the top of my head. Oh, you can do PayPal through the TFGF.org. It is set up. Look into it. We're doing amazing work. I've reunited over 8,300 fatherless children with over 32. I don't remember the exact numbers at this point because a few have changed over the last couple of days. Some reunites happened at the top of this year. And I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but we are in the 8,000s when it comes to kids. And we're going to keep it moving. And I could have done much more if I had more money. And I know people are like, well, get into the grant field. Yeah, grants haven't. Part of the reason I hadn't gotten any grants is number one, I'm a 501c4. And number two, grants tend to look at risk youth, and they weren't interested in reunification. They weren't interested in dads being a part of their children's lives. More and more starting to happen concerning that. So we are looking into new grants. But foundations and organizations are also supported by local community. And so I've got to ask y'all for money. So please donate to tfgf.org. Look at how you can get your business involved, match program, things of that nature. Sponsoring a fatherless child through peer groups. I just got the okay today to launch another peer group in Boys and Girls Clubs in North Georgia. Super excited about that. Sponsoring a fatherless child to be a part of our peer groups is $125 for 13 weeks. That is little to nothing. Some of you can do that. Some of you can sponsor an entire peer group, which is $2,500. Let's move this forward. One of the reasons I do the peer groups is so that we can teach children who are growing up in fatherless homes how to break the cycle and the curses now. We're giving them leadership and development, but we're also giving them the tools to overcome the trauma, how to recognize what it is that I'm teaching you right now. We teach this to children, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way to 17-year-olds. And I can tell you, when you start seeing my ambassador, I can't wait to film with her in Atlanta when I get there. I cannot wait to film with her. She was 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. I think her brother was 8 and she was 9. She was one of the first kids in my program. And she is now 20, killing the game at Georgia State, working, very intelligent. And now she's going to come on to be our ambassador and talk to kids about what she learned back then and how it's impacting her now. She emailed me and said, Miss Tori, I get now what you were doing. I know how to overcome trauma. I know how to heal myself because of what you taught me at 9 years old. She stayed in our program for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. That's what you're sewing into. You're not only sewing into dads. I know some of you are like, well, I don't want to sew into no daddy reuniting. That's fine. That's fine. You can sew into that too. You can sponsor a dad. Trust me. You can go on the site. It'll tell you. But some of you are like, I want to sew into the children. You can do that. Go to the website. It tells you exactly how to do that. Some of you want to sew into, people are trying to get onto this new expansion and this new Africa situation. Ask me. Inbox me. I've got you. Let's have a conversation, because 2022 is a different year, and I'm excited about where it's going to take us. So it is 8:08. I've been on here already an hour and 9 minutes. I'm going to get off of here. You guys have an amazing night and enjoy the rest of your week. I will be back on Thursday. We're going to talk about Help is on the way Thursday. We're going to have some legal conversation. And then Friday, I'm on Instagram. I am not on Facebook, but on Friday, I do the impact of fatherlessness. And so we take one of the statistics. Maybe I'll jump on Facebook as well. But we take one of the statistics and we break it down. And we only do it for 30 minutes. We break it down. All right. So you guys have an amazing night. And I will talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.